Hello and good afternoon. Another hot day in Arkansas. There's a topic here I wanted to go over today a little bit, and that is about the 7 churches in the Revelation. Now, the churches in Revelation throw a lot of people off when they're initially reading through the book of Revelation, because they see these churches, and indeed they were churches of the first century during the time of the Apostle John when he wrote this, because he wrote Revelation through the guidance of Christ, and he sent letters to each of these churches. In these letters was the entire prophecy of the Revelation, as well as individual descriptions of the churches and messages to the churches from Christ. Now, the fact that these churches of the first century are in a book that describes a future that has not yet come is something that can throw a lot of people off. So the question is, who are the churches really? What are they doing in the book of Revelation? But I want to start with Revelation 1:1, give a description here. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him to show unto his servants things which must shortly come to pass, and he sent and signified it by his angel unto his servant John. So the book of Revelation is something that is going to be coming. We know that. So how do the churches fit into that? Well, I think we have an answer for that if you'll stay with me. Let's look at chapter 1, verse 3. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. One notable thing about this third verse as we enter the book of Revelation is that it doesn't say you have to understand the entire book of Revelation. What it does say is that you hear it. When you hear it, it goes into your mind, you ponder these ideas in your heart. In time, everyone will be able to see how Revelation plays out in the 70th week of Daniel. That's what Revelation is the 70th week of Daniel. We can talk about the weeks of Daniel in another topic if you're not familiar with those. I'll make those in a different video. One thing that many early theologians attempted to do with the churches was to add dispensationalism to the churches. Now, dispensationalism is an idea that really has its foothold in pre-tribulation. And the reason why dispensationalism is involved in that is because pre-tribulation believers say that the final week of that's in Revelation of Daniel, that Christians won't be here. They'll be raptured at the very beginning. That's a point I disagree with. But they use dispensationalism in the sense that they say that because the Revelation deals with the Jewish people in Revelation specifically, and it does, that the church is not there. Now, there's a couple other points in Revelation, the book of Revelation, that people will point to and say this is where the Christians are not there. I disagree with that. But again, that's another video I want to make on some of those points. But let's stick with the churches themselves. One thing you notice about the churches that in the writings of these, and I'm not going to read every verse and every part of a church, but within every church description in chapters 2 and 3, Revelation 2 and 3, there is this phrase, he that hath an ear. Well, certainly the people in the churches at that time had ears, and they got the message that was delivered from John. But the Bible goes to everyone. And so when you see that he that hath an ear, that includes you, that includes me. Because the book is, as in verse 1, things which must shortly come to pass. So the future description includes the churches. Now, what's in the churches that will come to pass? Well, I've outlined very briefly the 7 churches: Ephesus, Smyrna, Pergamos, Thyatira, Sardis, Philadelphia, and Laodicea. And I put just very short descriptions that are in the Bible, and all of them have he that hath an ear. So it goes to everyone. But the description of Ephesus is that they left their first love. In other words, they're going through the motions. and the chapter in the book goes through more description, but it's a church that's going through motions. Not necessarily disbelievers, but just they're only doing the motions, but they're not doing it through the Spirit. They're doing actions. Then we have Smyrna, and it is the persecuted church. Within there, we do find one interesting verse where it says there'll be a 10-day tribulation. Now, this is not the great tribulation that is talked about by Jesus Christ, which is a longer period and affects the world. But it does mention a 10-day tribulation for Christians that are standing up against the evil forces of the world during the 70th week. Pergamos is described as a worldly church, and the Bible describes it as the doctrine of Balaam. Balaam was a god that imbued with the activity of sexual immorality and eating food sacrificed to gods. Thyatira was the pagan church, and the Bible says, allowed Jezebel within the church. Well, Jezebel is a symbol of the paganism. So you have a Christian church, but it's infiltrated with pagan ideas, even pagan deities, very, very so much against the sole position of God. Got a mosquito around my ear too, so I'm kind of knocking that off. Then we have Sardis, which is a lifeless church. Again, similar to Ephesus in the sense that they're just going through the motions, but there is nothing going on in this church. People show up, sing a couple of hymns perhaps, listen to a service, and they go on their way, not changed a bit by what they see in the churches or have learned in the churches. Church of Philadelphia is known as the faithful church. They've looked toward God, they've engaged the Spirit, and so they are the church that we all want to be in. And one thing it says in there is that they will be kept from the hour of temptation. Now, the hour of temptation, the way I describe that, is the actual Great Tribulation itself. Now, by pre-wrath position, which has the Great Tribulation that I believe, which has the Great Tribulation described by Christ that begins at the middle part of the week and goes for a short period of time, and then you have the rapture, and then you go into the trumpet judgments, which are not against Christians. So during that period, this faithful church is kept from the hour of temptation. In other words, they're protected. Laodicea is a church that's neither hot nor cold. And Christ says, I would rather you either be hot or cold. So the members, they're not on fire for God. They're not entirely distanced from the church. Nevertheless, they're not really committed. Now, one thing that strikes me, and this is my opinion of these churches, is that what they do is they describe levels of faith. Levels of faith. And so a question that the Christian should ask themselves is, which one of these attributes do I stand? Am I lifeless? Am I on fire for the faith? Am I persecuted? Am I destined to be persecuted? Well, that's a whole nother topic. But these are just very short descriptions, and you can find more if you read through chapters verse 2 and 3, but I'm not going to go through all that today. One thing I can say is that at the end of each one of the descriptions of these churches, if you are the overcomer, you will meet up with Christ in the way that Christ wants us to meet him. And just as an example, speaking of the Ephesus church, chapter 2, verse 7, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of thee the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of God. And we go to the Smyrna church, and at the end of that description, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith to the churches. To him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna, and will give him a white stone, and in the stone a new name written, which no man knoweth, saving he can receive it. The church of Thyatira, he that, verse 26, chapter 2, verse 26, and he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. And this phrase, slightly different in each one, is at the end of each of the descriptions of the churches. So there you have it. This is who the churches are, and that's why the title is "We Have Met the Churches of Revelation, and They Are Us." Listen, I appreciate you watching, and if you have any questions, put them in the comments below. I'll be glad to answer them as best I can, and have a blessed day.